What if the profound patience you think you're practicing right now is actually just disobedience in disguise?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy thought right off the bat.
Right. Like, imagine sitting by your front door for days, eagerly waiting for this life-changing package to arrive in the mail.
Yeah, you're checking the tracking number, you're staring out the window.
Exactly. You endure the wait with this incredible stoicism, but then you realize you never actually clicked purchase on the website.
Oh, man. Your cart is still full.
Yeah. The wait is completely meaningless because the required action was, well, it was never taken. Welcome to the deep dive.
Yes, welcome back to Transformation Talks.
We are bringing you an exclusive After the Amen deep dive into a recent, really impactful sermon from Transformation Ministries' own Elder Richard Ross.
And before we start unpacking the actual mechanics of maintaining hope when, absolutely everything in your life seems to be going wrong, take a second to hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure you never miss an update.
Exactly, because we are regularly dissecting these complex themes to figure out how they actually apply to your daily life.
So the source material today is Elder Ross's message on what it takes to keep hope alive
Yeah.
in the face of just immense adversity.
Right, but to really grasp the architecture of his argument, we kind of need to look at how the service began.
Yeah, Pastor Jeffrey West delivered this women's history moment that essentially built the thematic foundation for the entire morning.
He did. He focused on a very specific, and I'd say often overlooked, arena of historical struggle.
You mean the trailblazing Black and Latina women in the sport of golf?
Exactly. When you think about the 1960s and systemic barriers, golf was arguably one of the most culturally entrenched fortresses of wealth and racial exclusion.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And Pastor West highlights Althea Gibson, who most people probably recognize as a tennis legend.
Right, but she also shattered barriers by becoming the first Black woman to compete on the LPGA Tour.
Which is incredible. And then he brings up Renee Powell.
Yeah, Renee Powell's story is it's intense. She faced such aggressive, institutionalized segregation that she was actually physically barred from entering the golf clubhouses where she was competing.
I mean, the psychological resilience required in her situation is staggering when you break it down.
Absolutely, because instead of internalizing that rejection and, walking away from a sport that actively did not want her, she dedicated her entire life to teaching the game to others.
Wow. So she took the very system that excluded her and became a master educator within it.
Exactly. And Pastor West also highlights Anne Gregory, the first Black woman to play in a USGA championship.
Right. And because of the racism of that era, she literally had to change into her golf attire inside her car in the parking lot.
Yeah, just think about the cognitive reframing happening in that parking lot.
I mean, she is a championship-level athlete competing at the highest tier of her sport, and she's relegated to the backseat of a sedan just to put her shoes on.
It's wild. She could have easily let the indignity of that environment strip away her identity as a golfer.
But the core insight Pastor West pulls from these historical accounts really changes our fundamental definition of hope.
How so?
Well, he argues that hope is not the absence of struggle, nor is it just like maintaining a sunny disposition.
Right, it's not just positive thinking.
Exactly. It is the active, gritty decision to keep believing and moving forward anyway. The ultimate lesson from these women is the fact that despite locked doors and profound humiliation, they still showed up.
Which fundamentally changes how we should view resistance.
Let's view this through the lens of building physical strength. Like when you walk into a gym and see a massive amount of weight on a barbell, your brain recognizes it as an obstacle.
Yeah, it's heavy, it's intimidating, gravity is actively pulling it down.
Right. But if your goal is hypertrophy, if you want to build muscle, you don't avoid the weight. You have to engage with it.
Oh, that makes total sense. The
Yeah.
resistance isn't a signal for you to stop lifting?
No, the resistance is the exact mechanism that forces the muscle fibers to adapt and grow stronger. So, systemic barriers and locked clubhouse doors were the resistance these women pushed against to build a profound historical legacy.
So the question then becomes how that framework of physical and historical persistence translates into the spiritual and psychological resilience required to survive today.
Yeah, and this is where Pastor West's introduction hands the baton over to Elder Richard Ross.
Right. When Ross takes the pulpit, he anchors his entire theological message on a famous, culturally resonant directive from the late Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Keep hope alive.
Exactly. Ross emphasizes Reverend Jackson's belief that surrender simply isn't an option because, inevitably, the morning will eventually come.
But Ross doesn't just offer that as a warm platitude, right?
Mm.
He immediately contrasts that mandate with a stark diagnosis of our current global reality.
Yeah, he paints a picture of a world on the brink. He points out the macro-level stressors nations seemingly always at war, economic inflation driving prices to historic highs.
And a societal shift where the general empathy and love of many have just grown cold.
He even brings in bizarre environmental anomalies, like he references a recent article about the Earth's rotation physically slowing down.
Which is terrifying. He basically categorizes the modern era as being in a state of compounding, unrelenting crises.
He is tapping into the psychological weight of the modern information diet.
Right, because we are constantly fed a 24/7 stream of catastrophic news.
And Ross argues that in this specific environment, believers cannot afford to view hope as an optional accessory. He frames it as an absolute bedrock survival tool.
I genuinely struggle with this concept sometimes, though.
How so?
Well, if you are a listener dealing with the threat of eviction, or you're watching your grocery bill double, or you're doom scrolling through footage of global conflicts, hearing a list of global catastrophes might actually induce a state of paralysis.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
Right. So when the reality of the world feels that tangibly heavy, telling someone to just have hope borders on toxic positivity. It runs the risk of sounding naive or, completely out of touch with the gravity of their situation.
That's a really valid point, but Ross actually anticipates that exact friction.
Oh, really? Does he address it?
Yeah, he doesn't advocate for putting your head in the sand or ignoring the very real pain of the world. To counter the idea of toxic positivity, he introduces a specific diagnostic framework.
Okay, what does that look like?
He categorizes hope into 3 distinct states: living, dying, and dead.
Interesting.
He argues that what most people call hope is actually just passive wishing,
Yeah.
which is fragile and easily destroyed by bad news.
Right. Like, I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow.
Exactly. A living hope, on the other hand, is an active, well-exercised psychological and spiritual anchor. Without this specific living variant of hope, he argues that the human mind inevitably spirals into becoming directionless and desperate.
He defines this living hope by rooting it in the biblical text of 1 Peter 1, connecting it directly to the theological concept of the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Right.
But to give the listener a flesh and bone example of what a living hope looks like under extreme duress, he points to the Apostle Paul.
And Paul provides the ultimate case study in traumatic endurance.
Oh, without a doubt. Just look at the historical resume of suffering Paul endured. He was whipped multiple times, beaten with rods, imprisoned, stoned, and literally left for dead.
Not to mention he survived 3 separate shipwrecks.
Right. He spent his life in constant danger from bandits and hostile mobs, endured starvation, freezing temperatures, and, in one specific instance, survived being bitten by a poisonous snake.
It's almost unbelievable. From a purely psychological standpoint, enduring that level of repetitive, unpredictable trauma usually results in chronic cynicism or complete mental collapse.
Yet Paul's writings view these experiences almost as badges of honor.
Yeah, and the mechanism at play here is what a living hope actually manufactures in the human mind. Analyzing Ross's reading of the book of Philippians, this specific type of hope does 3 functional things.
Okay, let's break those down.
First, it drives a godly ambition, a persistent, forward-looking desire to know Christ that supersedes current circumstances.
Okay, and second?
Second, it builds immense patience, which is the cognitive ability to withstand a prolonged wait without making impulsive, panic-driven decisions.
That is so hard to do.
It really is. And third, it produces an undeterred focus. It shifts your locus of control so that you aren't perpetually distracted by the noise of the present or the trauma of your past.
To illustrate that undeterred focus, Elder Ross pulls out a fascinating cultural reference that completely changes the tone.
Oh, yeah, I love this part.
He quotes an old rap lyric stating that rocket ships don't come equipped with rear-view mirrors.
It's such a great visual.
Right. The logic is simple. When you are launching into orbit, the sheer velocity and purpose of the mission mean there is absolutely no reason to look back. Your entire trajectory is forward.
And he builds on that momentum. He then uses this brilliant piece of wordplay around the concept of pressure.
Oh, the press and sure concept.
Exactly. He says that when the enemy, or life's circumstances, applies pressure to you, you have to apply pressure back. He breaks the word down into 2 parts: press and sure.
The linguistic framing there is highly intentional.
Yeah, it implies that pushing back against your obstacles isn't a frantic, flailing reaction.
Right, you press back because you are sure of your foundation. It is an act of absolute certainty.
But, knowing you should apply press, and sure, pressure is great in theory. It makes total sense when we're analyzing history or reading theology.
But theory often falls apart the second your own biology rebels against you.
Yeah.
Which brings us to what makes this deep dive so compelling. Ross immediately transitions from talking about the Apostle Paul to revealing a visceral, real-time, physical crisis that he was experiencing that exact same day.
Yeah, he shares a gripping personal testimony with the congregation.
What happened?
He explains that he showed up to the building to preach and play the keyboard while suffering from a severe pinched nerve that heavily restricted the use of his right arm.
I mean, that alone is tough.
Right, but the neurological pain was secondary to a much more terrifying medical event. The afternoon before delivering this message, his heart went into atrial fibrillation.
Wow. For anyone unfamiliar, atrial fibrillation, or AFib, is a massive, immediate medical emergency.
It really is, and he describes the sensation in vivid detail. His heart rate was fluctuating wildly.
Like, how high are we talking?
It would race up to 120 or 130 beats per minute and then suddenly plummet to 70 or 80. The upper and lower chambers of his heart were completely out of synchronization.
That has to be terrifying. He compares the physical feeling to someone sitting in a car, slamming their foot down on the gas pedal, abruptly letting off, and then slamming it down again.
Yeah, and the physiological reality of AFib carries immense stakes. When the atrium quivers, instead of executing a full rhythmic beat, blood can pool and become static inside the heart.
And that leads to clots, right?
Exactly. This stasis allows clots to form, which increases the risk of a fatal stroke fivefold.
That is no joke.
No, it's not. Ross openly acknowledges the standard hospital protocols for this condition because he has a medical history and has been through it before.
So what's the normal intervention?
Normally, it requires receiving intravenous medication to chemically force the heart to flip back into a normal rhythm, or the patient is anesthetized and physically shocked with defibrillator paddles.
Right. So facing that kind of severe, immediate mortality threat, his response was completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, instead of rushing to the emergency room, Ross describes being enveloped by a peace that passes all understanding.
He chose to stay in his home. He applied anointing oil to his chest, turned on worship music, and made a conscious decision to refuse to let his hope die.
And according to his testimony, after 2.5 hours of this focused calm, his heart naturally reset itself into a normal sinus rhythm.
Now, there's a profound tension in this part of the sermon that has to be carefully navigated.
Oh, absolutely.
Because atrial fibrillation can kill you. A listener hearing this might wonder how to balance practical, necessary medical action, like calling 911 when having a cardiac event, with the kind of radical patient faith Ross is describing.
Right. Is the underlying message here an advocacy against modern medicine and science?
That's exactly the friction. If someone is having a heart attack, the instruction shouldn't be to just turn on a Spotify playlist and wait. How does his testimony function without crossing into dangerous territory?
Well, the key lies in how he meticulously frames the story. He explicitly mentions the IVs and the defibrillator paddles, acknowledging that he has utilized the hospital's medical protocols in the past.
Okay, so he's not anti-medicine.
No, not at all. He is not setting up a dichotomy where science is the enemy of faith. Instead, he is illustrating the immense physiological and psychological power of a living hope.
How does that work in a crisis, though?
When a cardiac event begins, the human brain's natural response is terror. That panic triggers the sympathetic nervous system, flooding the body with adrenaline and cortisol.
Which actually exacerbates an irregular heartbeat and increases the strain on the cardiovascular system.
Exactly. Ross utilized his theological framework of living hope to intentionally engage his parasympathetic nervous system. His faith prevented the psychological spiral into panic, providing him with an inexplicable calm that allowed his body the optimal environment to endure and eventually naturally resolve a terrifying ordeal.
It essentially served as the ultimate, real-time stress test of his own sermon topic.
Yeah, he had to apply that press and certainty against the very real panic rising in his own chest.
But Ross recognizes that not everyone is operating at that level of resilience. He spends the final segment of his message outlining a very stark diagnosis of the opposite condition.
Right. What it looks like when hope goes into decline.
Exactly.
He roots this diagnostic section in Hebrews 10:35, which issues a clear warning to believers, do not cast away your confidence.
And the theological promise in the text is that maintaining this confidence yields a great recompense.
In this context, recompense means a literal compensation or reward for enduring the tears, the grueling delays, and the exhausting labor.
But when a person's hope begins to die, that confidence is the first thing they throw away.
And he lays out the psychological symptoms of a dying hope with incredible accuracy.
Yeah, he says, you know your hope is in critical condition when you catch yourself giving up on the exact problems you used to fight against with vigor.
The fight just leaves you, and you simply accept defeat as the new baseline.
Another symptom he identifies is a creeping, pervasive depression that strips away your sense of agency, making you feel entirely powerless.
He also points to the heavy, suffocating weight of condemnation.
That quiet internal voice, insisting that your specific marriage, your financial ruin, or your addiction is simply too far gone for God or anyone else to fix.
It is the textbook definition of learned helplessness, and he traces the root cause of this dying hope back to a single culprit: impatience.
But he immediately introduces a vital caveat regarding how patience functions.
Right. He argues that patience is only a valid spiritual tool if you are simultaneously actively doing the will of God.
Just sitting around waiting for circumstances to improve isn't patience, it's passivity.
And he uses a humorous, culturally specific example to hammer this point home.
Oh, I love this part. He describes a person who claims they are patiently waiting on God for a breakthrough, and they are supposedly engaging in a religious fast to show their dedication.
But behind closed doors, they get antsy, take matters into their own hands, and secretly chow down on Chinese food and chitlins.
They broke the parameters of the fast because they felt the wait was taking too long, and they wanted immediate gratification.
It perfectly illustrates the danger of disobedience masquerading as patience.
Let's go back to the analogy we opened the show with, the online shopping cart.
Yeah, that fits perfectly here.
If you are sitting eagerly by your front door, waiting for a package, checking the tracking, and staring out the window, you might look like the most patient person in the world.
But if your cart is still full online because you never actually clicked purchase, your patience is delusional.
Exactly. You can't just passively wait for a result. You have to actively follow the instructions. You have to execute the required actions.
If you aren't doing the work, your patience is entirely misplaced. Eventually, the absolute lack of results will erode your confidence, and your hope will flatline.
So the inevitable question to the listener is, if you realize you are exhibiting the symptoms of a dying hope, or if you recognize that your proverbial cart is still full, what is the antidote?
Right, how do you resuscitate a dead hope?
Elder Ross brings the entire message to a head with a highly concentrated theological conclusion. He asserts that Jesus Christ is the sole resurrectionist.
The argument posits that just as Jesus historically conquered physical death, he is the only entity capable of reviving a dead hope, restoring dead confidence, and breathing life back into a failing belief system.
And he closes the service with a passionate altar call.
What's really notable is that this call isn't just directed at new converts.
No, he specifically targets people who have been sitting in the church pews for years, but have allowed their internal hope to slowly starve.
He urges them to rededicate themselves, emphasizing with absolute urgency that tomorrow is not promised.
And when you realize he lived that exact reality just hours before with his heart malfunctioning, it strips away any cliche from that phrase.
It grounds his entire theological argument in the sudden, unpredictable fragility of human life. The next minute is genuinely not guaranteed.
It demands immediate introspection from anyone listening to the message.
It really does.
So what does this all mean for you as you go about your week? We started this deep dive talking about physical resistance in the gym. Pushing against a heavy weight isn't the sign that you should quit. It's the necessary friction required to build muscle.
Right.
If a living hope is indeed like a muscle that requires active focus, certainty, and patience to grow, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought regarding your daily habits.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think critically about how you consume information every single day. When you spend your morning doom scrolling the news, soaking in the wars, the economic anxiety, and all the global catastrophes Elder Ross mentioned, are you actively starving your hope muscle?
Wow.
Conversely, when you intentionally choose to engage with uplifting, challenging, or perspective-shifting material, are you feeding that resilience? Are you actively training your mind to still show up even when the clubhouse doors of life are locked against you?
The trajectory of your resilience is heavily determined by the diet of your attention.
Exactly. If you found value in exploring these mechanics with us today, please take a second to like this episode and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you these insights.
We'd love to have you join our growing community of learners.
And we enthusiastically invite you to experience the source material live. You can join Transformation Ministries live on the Transformation Ministries VB YouTube channel or on their Facebook page every single Sunday at 10 a.m.
Furthermore, if you want to witness the full power of Elder Ross's testimony and his altar call for yourself, you can watch the replays of the entire sermon right now on the Transformation Ministries YouTube channel.
Until next time, audit your attention, evaluate your patience, and keep pushing against that weight. We'll see you on the next deep dive.